CBS 6 News starts now.
A war in Europe, frightening scenes from Ukraine tonight. The Russian invasion bringing deadly consequences.
Peace on our continent has been shattered. We now have war in Europe on a scale and of a type we thought belonged to history.
From the cities that are face to face with the threat to the response in Washington and in our own backyard, where many still have a close connection to Ukraine.
Our hearts go out to all the residents of that country that is now under siege.
We have team coverage tonight as the world looks on in horror and disbelief.
All eyes on Eastern Europe tonight as Russia's assault on Ukraine is being called a brutal act of war.
We're going to look live right now at Ukraine's capital, Kiev. It's nearing midnight there right now, but this morning people across the country woke up to the sounds and sights of war. Missile strikes, helicopters flying above, tanks on the ground. The country's health minister says 57 Ukrainians are dead so far as a result of the invasion. More than 150 more are wounded. President Biden keeping American troops on the sidelines in nearby NATO countries, but announcing another round of economic sanctions against Russia.
The Russian military has begun a brutal assault on the people of Ukraine. Without provocation, without justification, without necessity, this is a premeditated attack. Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
The sanctions are aimed at cutting off a majority of Russia's high-tech imports. President Biden says to stop the modernization of its military. New sanctions also take aim at Russian banks, which the president says altogether hold around $1 trillion in assets. President Biden says more than 175,000 Russian troops have been deployed since the start of the conflict.
The attack on Ukraine has come from all sides. This map shows just some of the places where explosions have been reported, all corners of the country, including the capital city, Kiev, and Kharkiv, the second largest city there. Now, reports ahead tonight from the ground in those cities as we keep a close eye on Russia's next moves.
Our team coverage continuing right here in the capital region tonight. Governor Kathy Hochul says New York has one of the largest Ukrainian populations outside of Ukraine. CBS 6's Leanne DeRosa is live for us tonight in Watervliet. Leanne, our community here experiencing a lot of emotions. So how are people handling all this?
That's right. I spoke with a handful of the members of the Ukrainian American community here in the capital region. They're shocked. They're scared. They're so upset. Many of them have family and friends in Ukraine, and they haven't been able to contact them today since the invasion began, and they're worried. But they are finding ways to help.
Sorrow and sympathy and feeling helpless towards all the Ukrainian people.
Stephanie and Roman Karpishka have been up all night watching as Russia invades Ukraine. We sat with them Thursday afternoon and watched President Biden address the nation. Do you think what President Biden outlined is strong enough?
No.
Well, again, I was expecting him to make a statement about pulling the SWIFT system. And of course, if you can't come at the initial moment with something the strongest possible and say, well, we might do it next week or next month or whatever, you're losing momentum. And in the meantime, sadly, there are people who are bleeding right now and dying right now.
The Karpishkas have a strong connection to their Ukrainian heritage.
Our Ukrainian history is being absolutely distorted by Mr. Putin.
In the capital region, they're closely connected to other Ukrainian Americans. They all gathered to pray for peace in Watervliet on Sunday. We spoke with other community members who struggle to find the words to describe their emotions.
And it's heartbreaking to watch people die in real time. It's very difficult.
They all have family and friends in Ukraine, but haven't talked to them since the invasion began.
Been calling all afternoon.
We think there's an internet problem in the afternoon.
That maybe there's an internet problem. We don't know.
And how does that make you feel?
Worried. Very worried.
As they watch the situation unfold from the U.S., they pray for peace and stand united with Ukraine, and they're finding ways to help on a local level.
Been asking our community to contact our congressmen to make sure they support various bills that are in front of Congress for support of Ukraine or to punish Russia.
We feel very much for Ukraine, for Europe, for the world, because the whole world is watching.
And if you would like to help, you can donate to the humanitarian efforts. You can do that through the Ukrainian Congress Committee or any of the local Ukrainian American churches. Reporting in Waterville, Leanne DeRosa, CBS 6 News.
All right, thank you so much, Leanne. In Russia tonight, it's not all glowing support for President Vladimir Putin's assault on Ukraine. More than 1,000 people have been detained in anti-war protests going on across the country. An independent monitoring group reports those arrests in 44 cities. Demonstrations without a permit are illegal in Russia, but individual single-person protests are allowed. And we have seen demonstrations around the world, a global backing for the people of Ukraine. Crowds gathered today in U.S. cities, some seen here in Times Square, joining the chorus of demands for peace.
The streets of Ukraine's second largest city were nearly deserted this morning. Overnight explosions were heard to the northeast of Kharkiv, and video shows missile strikes outside of the city, which sits just around 20 miles from the border with Russia. CBS's Holly Williams is in Kharkiv tonight, describing her experience as that attack unfolded overnight.
Well, it was just after 5 a.m. local time that we started hearing a series of loud thuds, a dozen, perhaps 24 of them, clearly large explosions. They've continued sporadically, by the way. Shortly after that, Ukraine confirmed that it was under attack, saying that they were Russian missile strikes targeting its military infrastructure. Ukraine now says that Russian forces have come across its borders, including just near here in Kharkiv. However, we have not seen them in the city at this point. Ukraine says it will distribute weapons to veterans and volunteers so they can help defend their country. And in a rallying speech overnight to his people, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said, quote, "You are courageous, you are unbroken, you are Ukrainian." Holly Williams, CBS News, Kharkiv, Ukraine.
Tonight, Ukraine's president is calling one move by Russian forces a, quote, declaration of war against the whole of Europe. Russia has taken control of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, the site of the 1986 disaster that spread nuclear material all around the world. Chernobyl is roughly 80 miles north of Kiev. President Biden says this is a dangerous moment for freedom all around the world.
Chief political correspondent Scott Thuman brings us up to speed on the response from the international community tonight.
So here's what's been going on in Ukraine. Russia invaded or attacked from three sides: the north through Belarus, which is an ally, through the south by Crimea, and across the east. This is the Donbass, that contested region which we showed you during our reporting for Full Measure, where we were on the front lines. And this is where a large majority of the casualties have taken place over a long stretch of time. 8 years they've been fighting right here, about 14,000 Ukrainians killed during that time. So what is Vladimir Putin's endgame? What is it he ultimately wants? Some believe it's to take Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, and then install a pro-Russian government. Others say it's about getting this territory down here. That gives Russia more access to the Black Sea. Then again, people wondering, what if he goes beyond all of this? Now, as the fighting intensified with explosions in multiple cities, including the capital, and almost every large region of Ukraine with widespread reports of casualties, President Biden met virtually this morning with other world leaders from the Situation Room. Biden adding that more painful economic sanctions against Russia will take place on Thursday, but they haven't worked so far to stop or deter Putin. So what now?
America stands up to bullies. We stand up for freedom. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions.
As far as the U.S. military's involvement, President Biden has sent thousands of American troops to Eastern Europe, not into Ukraine. However, there is another aspect to all of this. What if Putin takes this fight past Ukraine's borders? There are NATO member countries surrounding the entire region: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and many others. And there are U.S. troops stationed in several of those countries right now to shore up support. And President Biden has reiterated, we will defend every inch of those countries.
Our forces are not and will not be engaged in the conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies.
So as the fighting continues, aside from those crippling economic sanctions, the way President Biden puts it, that he says will do real damage to Russia's economy, it's kind of a wait and watch scenario for the United States. And also wondering what else may be triggered by Putin's actions. Purely hypothetical, but some wonder, will this now be a time that China, an ally of Russia, will decide is right to invade Taiwan? It's just one more reason the entire world is on edge watching what's happening here. In Washington, I'm Scott Thuman.
And all that leads us to our question of the day. What role should the U.S. take in the Russia invasion of Ukraine? Economic sanctions, military support for Ukraine, or stay out of the conflict? You can head online to CBS6Albany.com to answer.
CBS 6 is committed to bringing you everything you need to know about this situation in Europe, what is now being called an all-out war by many. Stay with us on air, online, and with our free news app for breaking news updates whenever they come in.